Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Raymond, for that wonderful introduction. It's good to see so many young people and all of you here today. It really is exciting. So just right off the bat, I want to recognize all of the incredible people in the room. So give yourselves a round of applause and welcome to the White House. Welcome to the White House. Thank you again, muchísimas gracias, for being here and being a part of this great effort. I want to thank you for setting the example of showing your friends and families that it's possible through hope and hard work to achieve many great things. And a big thank you to all of the community and business leaders that are here today, because I know that every single day you give up so much to do to help enhance our communities, but particularly in helping our young people, because that really is something that all of us should be concerned about. It matters to the inner city youth who grew up in towns where they may not have had a parent who was present for him or her, that could have or may have been lured into a gang or some negative activity. It makes a big difference for those that are just coming out of juvenile detention, also to know that there is something else available for them, that they also have choices. So it's really important that those of you that are here can help to provide that additional expertise, motivation, guidance, and leadership. And many of you here have been doing that for a long time. You have a special calling, as we say, to give people hope and inspiration, but especially our young people right now, because I don't think I need to remind you that the statistics out there show a very grim outlook for young people. Whether you are coming out of college or out of high school, or if you're looking for work, and you're seeing so many things reported negatively in the media about you, about images about young people. I think that in and of itself is cause for us to do something, to take some action. So I want to tell you that it's very, very important that especially at this time that we come together. And we come together with a particular focus on those underserved communities, because it's something that the President and I truly believe in. And I say that from the heart, because as someone who also grew up in a low-income community, I didn't even know that at the time we were so-called poor. But technically, through government statistics and census figures, I was one of those family members. I was also someone who grew up with a very hard and fast work ethic because of what my parents taught me. And they were both working real hard. I didn't get to spend a lot of time like a normal child, I would say, because I had to spend time helping to raise my brothers and sisters. There were 7 of us. And Mom and Dad both had to work. And what they said meant something. So if you had a job to do at home, you did it. And if you didn't, you were going to see them later on. So I knew best right there that Hilda was going to pay attention. And when my mother would say my name in Spanish, I really got worried. Because it's pronounced Hilda, not Hilda. So I knew something was up then. But I learned so much from my parents about the value of work and work ethic, and especially for young people, because I think about when I was growing up, we had to work harder and look harder for summer jobs, and that's what my talk is today, about how important that first summer job is. And I bet you every single one of you here has a story about maybe your first job, and what that meant to you, and what that meant for someone to come out and actually give you a chance to start something anew, and what it meant to take home maybe that first paycheck. I'll never forget what it meant to me. And I went home so proud, showing my mom and dad, and it was for 2 weeks of pay, and at that time it was for, I think, a total of maybe $30 a week. But at that time, it meant the world. It meant millions for me. But the best part about it was that I had a job. I had a summer job working as a recreational aide. I'm probably one of the few Secretary of Labors that can tell you that actually worked helping young students in the neighborhood from low-income backgrounds have outside activities, recreational activities, but I was supposed to be a supervisor. And here I was, not too much older than them, but giving them hope, inspiration, telling them how important it was to be involved in physical education activities, and being inquisitive and learning new things and getting along with different people. I even was exposed to a job working in a library. You say a library. Well, I was working at my high school library at the time, And boy, it opened up a whole new catalog of things for me, because I started to explore all the books and all the markings and the Dewey system, if you could even remember that, some of you in the room. Antiquated system, but it works. And people would actually have to come to me and ask me, well, where's this subject matter at? And I had to memorize all that. So I knew people they relied on me, and it meant a lot. So having a job as a young person, even at the age of 14, 15, 16, it meant a lot, and I know how important it is right now. That's why the president and I and others in the cabinet are so strongly behind this Summer Jobs Initiative. And it is about not asking the government to do more, because we've already asked. Now it's about us returning that. And there are many of you in this room, corporate and funders and other folks here, even nonprofits, who can open up your door. And I'm not saying your pocketbook, your door, because if you have an office or you have a setting that can allow for more slots to be made available for this summer youth employment initiative, then I would ask you to please do the right patriotic thing and to stand with us. Last year we were able to do this. We got about 90 positions available that were paid for young people, and I'm happy to say that this time around our goal is to hopefully get 250,000 young people out to work, and about 90,000 of those positions will be paid for. Some will be working in the federal government with Department of Ag and Interior, but a lot will be out in the private sector. And in fact, we have about 100 employers that have already stepped up to the plate. I've met individually with different mayors of local cities that run these programs as well, and they want to be a part of it. And the beauty is you don't have to do much. All you need to do is agree to be a part of this initiative, and we will list your agency, your nonprofit, your business, and we will then make it easier for young people to be able to download this information and find out where the nearest job is in their neighborhood. What a good way of getting the message out to young people. And that's the challenge right now. And I just want to tell you very quickly, last year we had a conversation with, maybe some of you know this one entrepreneur, Jamba Juice. Jamba Juice, who knows Jamba Juice? Who hasn't had Jamba Juice? It's pretty good. It's a very, very good product. Well, we met with the CEO there, actually visited their facility, but then came away thinking, how could we as Department of Labor help them with their future workforce? Well, they found out about our Job Corps program that we run at Treasury Island. And it's a group of young people that get trained in culinary arts. These are skilled, credentialed young people. The government helps to pay for those credentials. But the beauty is, these are students that have had a tough life. They come from some of the roughest neighborhoods, but that shouldn't be something that you write off, because many of them want that second chance, if only given that opportunity. Well, it turns out that Jamba Juice decided that they were going to make slots available last year, and they did. So they hired 2,700 young people last year, and they cooperated with us. So they're going to do it again this year. But more importantly, what they're going to do is join in partnership with us with the Job Corps program. So any of you employers in the room right now that are looking for skilled people to work for, please call the Department of Labor, dol.gov, go online and talk to us. But the Summer Youth Initiative is the one that I think is most important for you to understand. Just think of what that will mean if we can put people, young people, to work right now. It will mean that we'll have less criminal activity out in the streets. It will mean that we'll have these young people build up their resume, put things in their application, and hopefully get hired up again in the following year. And that's what's really important right now. All I can tell you is, in the short and the long of it is, that if I didn't have the opportunity to be exposed to some of these programs, Summer Youth was one of them, and also the JETPA program, which now is known as something that's administered through the Workforce Investment Act. I'm probably one of the few secretaries of labor that actually went through the program. And guess what? I'm proud of it, because all those experiences helped me to do the job that I do now with President Obama, trying to relay how important it is to provide these kinds of services and incentives, but to also give back. And that's what I think is good about the Summer Jobs Initiative, that we give back, and that people understand that, and that it's also a reward for companies, nonprofits that participate with us. So I want to ask you to go on dol.gov, Summer Jobs Plus, and make a note of it. And I challenge you, before you leave today, to please sign up and be a part of our effort. We have so much to offer and to do with you at the Department of Labor. Please consider working with us. We are your compadres and your amigos and amigas. So thank you very much for having me here this afternoon, and have a wonderful conference. And I want to salute the student from Rio Hondo College, Mr. Francisco Garcia, who I believe is here somewhere. There he is. All right. I served as a trustee at that campus, so something must be good going on there. That's great. Thank you and congratulations.
So thank you to Secretary Solis for putting a straightforward opportunity for everyone to assist youth in this country. I think we should jump right into our panels, and we'll start with one led by John Bridgeland. John is the former head of the Domestic Policy Council under President George W. Bush and a tireless advocate for youth. And the panel that he's leading will address the council's challenge to identify ways that communities can do more and more effectively to address their biggest challenges. But before they begin, and as they come on up, we have a very special message from our First Lady, Michelle Obama, our honorary co-chair of the White House Council for Community Solutions, that we'll be sharing on the screen. So,
hello, everyone. I'm First Lady Michelle Obama. One of the most beautiful things about America is that each of us has the opportunity to do our part to strengthen our communities and our country. That's the inspiration behind the White House Council for Community Solutions. My husband created this council because he understands that the best ideas often come from people like you, leaders who are working hard in your communities to help us solve some of our nation's most pressing challenges. And today, I want to speak with you about one of these challenges. Right now, nearly 6.7 million Americans between the ages of 16 and 24 are out of work or out of school. These young people are disconnected from their communities and unsure of what's ahead, and they're at risk of falling behind or slipping through the cracks. But we know that each of these young people has potential that's just waiting to be realized. So it's up to each of us to reach back, lift them up, and help them achieve their dreams. The Council has found a variety of innovative strategies to do just that. These include successful programs that provide young people with concrete job skills, leadership training, peer-to-peer mentoring programs, and increased educational opportunities. We can see strategies like those at work all across the country, including in my hometown of Chicago. This is the Gary Comer Youth Center. It's located just a few minutes away from where I grew up. It's a thriving, inspiring, beautiful place for young people to learn and grow and expand their imaginations. And it all started with the vision and passion of one person. Like me, Gary Comer grew up on the south side of Chicago. He worked hard and became a successful businessman known around the world. But he always wanted to give back to his hometown. So he rallied his community and brought the center to life. Today, we can see the results. Young people are dancing and singing, cooking and gardening. They're even recording their own albums and documenting their activities on camera. And 94% of the center's high school seniors this year have been accepted into college. Success like this is possible because these young people believe in themselves, and they're surrounded by committed staff and volunteers who do as well.
Basically, every single program here is there's a youth development component to it, and they have, like I said, sound studio, and they have a big gym, 2-story art room, and and there's always room for more. So when youth have an idea, they can obviously bring it up to the table.
I did grow up in this neighborhood. I grew up not too far, a couple of blocks away, and I remember when they first started building this youth center. So it was it's amazing to see the inside of it now. It's like it changed the whole look of the neighborhood. It changed the whole perception of the neighborhood.
Miguel and Maurice are part of an organization called Public Allies. This organization has a special place in my heart. Back when I was beginning my career, I served as Public Allies Executive Director in Chicago. I still strongly believe in its mission of developing the skills and passions of a new generation of leaders for our communities. And I'm so proud that leaders like Miguel and Maurice and so many others will continue to lift up their communities for years to come. So whether it's developing leadership skills through Public Allies or providing a safe place to learn and explore at the Gary Comer Youth Center, there are so many ways for us to engage America's young people. Maybe it's connecting them to jobs and job training. Maybe it's helping them graduate high school and apply to college. Or maybe it's addressing issues like teen pregnancy, youth violence, or drug and alcohol abuse. We all know that no one succeeds all by themselves. We succeed because of all those people who help us and believe in us along the way. Our families, our teachers, our coaches, our mentors, all those folks who encourage us when we're struggling and cheer us on when we succeed. So I want to thank you all for believing in our young people. Thank you for backing up that belief with action. And thank you for all your hard work every single day and for everything that you'll do in the years ahead.
So come on up, take those 4 seats. I'll speak from here until I get a seat. What a gift to the nation to have a First Lady and a President who care so deeply about Opportunity Youth and understand so deeply what it's going to take to help reconnect them. John mentioned there was darkness earlier. I just wanted to say what a source of light it's been to have the Wonder Woman, Patty Stonecipher, and this extraordinary council that's been working so hard, and the Opportunity Youth who we've listened to all across the country and their hopeful voices. Communities across America are innovating to address public challenges, from reducing teenage pregnancy and youth gang violence to helping students graduate from high school and college and find decent jobs. Call them community hope spots, places where leaders from all sectors come together around a shared vision, sobering facts, research-based solutions, and the will to do the hard and grinding work to govern together, align resources, dedicate staff, and hold themselves accountable year after year to achieve what many now call collective impact. With the help of many of you, and I'd like to single out Councilmember Michelle Jolin and Paul Schmitz, who have led this whole community collaborative effort, and Willa Selden of Bridgespan. A dozen communities were identified that moved their public problem-solving needles more than 10%, and more than 100 that were making important progress in this direction, places like Milwaukee, Cincinnati, and Boston. In addition to the efforts represented by this extraordinary panel today, the White House Council wanted to highlight a few other examples of community collaborations, such as the Philadelphia Youth Network that, in the face of a crippling high school dropout crisis, launched Project U-Turn, a collaboration of the mayor's office, school districts, service providers, family court, child welfare system, advocacy groups, and local funders. Did I get them all? That kept more students on track, increased available slots in alternative and accelerated high schools, and boosted high school graduation rates significantly. Thank you, Jenny Bagoni. Are you here today? For being with us today and for your extraordinary work. Thank you, Jenny. In the late 1990s, a group of 60 leaders came together and created the Community Partnership for Families of San Joaquin, a collaborative that brings local family services under one roof. An extensive survey showed that participants realized a more than 25% reduction in arrests, child protective service interventions, unexcused absences, and school suspensions. In crime-ridden north central Stockton, crime dropped 65%. Thank you, Rabina Asgar, who is also supposed to be with us today. Rabina, there you are. Thank you so much. See these hope spots? The largely rural county of Herkimer, New York, and I called them yesterday to make sure I got their name correctly pronounced. Herkimer, New York, had multiple challenges of poverty, underemployment, and youth entering costly and ineffective residential facilities. Motivated by a common vision, the county brought together more than 50 key stakeholders to improve service coordination. Since 2002, the number of youth in foster care has fallen 55%, and residential care days have dropped by 32%, helping both youth and the county. Thank you, Darlene Haman, for being with us today. Darlene, are you here? There you are. Thank you. What is distinct is that individual organizations are no longer just focused on outcomes for the people they serve, but on coordinating with other groups to achieve community-wide outcomes. Read all about it, and in-depth case studies of each of the 12 collaboratives that affected dramatic needle-moving change, as well as the Community Collaboratives Toolkit, can be found at the website serve.gov. So many people work so hard on it for so long, and it lifts up these wonderful stories. Please take a look at it and be equally inspired. We also, at the same time, found the dramatic numbers around this population of disconnected youth, more than 6.7 million young people who are disconnected from the two institutions that give them the most hope for the future, school and work. We also discovered, because we're trying to wake up policymakers, that the cost of the nation, $93 billion annually, $1.6 trillion over their lifetimes. And so the cost of inaction is high, but what we really found was the extraordinary unfulfilled potential that these young people represent. So the purpose of today's panel is to bring these two worlds together, the communities that are innovating to address public challenges and the opportunity youth who are part of the solution but also need their help. We will focus on understanding the elements of and barriers to overcome to achieve collective impact, and will highlight both prevention and recovery to ensure generations of young people do not become disconnected in the first place, and to help reconnect those who have become disconnected. Their bios are in your program, but here today is an extraordinary group. They are Mary Lou Young, President and CEO of Greater Milwaukee United Way, whose work has had both global reach on 4 continents and transformative effects in reducing pregnancy in Milwaukee. Next, we have Nancy Zimpher, who was a key leader of the Strive Partnership in Cincinnati and is now Chancellor of the State University of New York, whose own journey began from a one-room schoolhouse in the Ozarks to overseeing the nation's largest comprehensive system of higher education. Next, if I can see her, there she is. Lucretia is the Executive Director of the See Forever Foundation Maya Angelou Schools, whose work is fulfilling that See Forever dream for many low-income youth who are graduating from high school and having success in college. I'm going to go to the very end before I come to Jim Shelton. Next, we have David Kennedy, the Director of the Center for Crime Prevention and Control at John Jay College in New York City, whose innovative approach to addressing gang violence known as Operation Ceasefire, or the Boston Gun Project, resulted in a dramatic drop in youth violence in Boston and replication in cities all across America. And finally, our own Jim Shelton, Assistant Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Education and formerly of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who many call one of the most innovative officials in our government and has a title to match it. Please welcome this extraordinary panel. I'd rather be down there with you, but since we can't be, I want to start with you, Mary Lou. What are the key components that made your extraordinary effort in Milwaukee so effective? What are the elements of the secret sauce?
Well, I'll talk a little bit about Milwaukee, John, but I also want to talk about what works in all communities in general. First of all, we have an initiative in Milwaukee to reduce teen birth by 46% by 2015, and we are ahead of our goal to meet that goal. So we're very proud of that, but let me tell you, I think the most important thing is you need a committed community. There needs to be community will around an issue, and usually it's a combination of things that come together simultaneously. In 2005, Milwaukee was cited as having the second highest teen birth rate of any city in the country, second to Baltimore. Simultaneously with that, our business community was doing a lot of studies on why was the cost of health care for their employees increasingly higher in Milwaukee than it was in other Midwest cities. And at the same time, the United Way was uncovering data that found that teen pregnancy, while it was at catastrophic levels, 71% of teens were impregnated by men 20 years of age or older. So it was a point, I think, in time when the community said enough. We need to do something about it, and we need to do it for the long haul. And that's very, very important, because there will be many obstacles and challenges and barriers and policy changes that can get you off track. But when you make commitment in a community-wide collaborative. You have to say you're doing it for the long haul. There's a lot of trust building that happens. You need a neutral party to convene a community-wide effort, and I'm privileged to run the United Way. I would tell you, in many communities, the United Way can be that neutral party convener. We have multiple stakeholders, we have no hidden agenda, we help the underserved, and we have a history of doing credible outcomes. And to that point, you also need a third party that will do your measurement and evaluation and report out to the community. You need to provide year-round tasks for all the members so that they have actions and to work against and goals. You need well thought through and communicated strategies. You need a logic model. You need a public awareness campaign. That's something we've been very good at in Milwaukee. Our leadership of our Teen Pregnancy Prevention Initiative is co-led by the Commissioner of Health, and it's also led by the publisher of our local newspaper. So we get a lot of good, educated press that dispels the myths from the facts and talks about what the reality is, what we're doing about it, where we're having success and where we're not. We also engage youth in our community in a shock advertising campaign that we refresh every quarter, and they're the audience. It's not you and I. It has been as controversial as billboards that have a pregnant teen boy on them, to mannequins in department stores where we have a pregnant mannequin saying that prom night is not really, should be not your due date, it should be a date you look forward to. I think also the collaborative, if you do it well, you realize how it intersects with so many different things. Teen pregnancy is the catalyst for poverty. Milwaukee is the 4th most impoverished city in the country. Teen mothers are 50% less likely to graduate from high school. So if you look at education, you look at poverty, you see teen pregnancy. And I think when you do it right, you can communicate how those things intersect throughout your community and have a lot of success in all of them. And most importantly, in any collaborative, you need to remember that it's not about you. It's not about the United Way. It's not about our customers, our donors, our funds, our programs. It's about reducing teen pregnancy. As an adult, I am responsible for the children in my community. They need to be kids first and parents second. And that's the most important thing. Thank you.
Thank you. I understand. Better. Nice to be with you all. Lucretia, you've worked with low-income youth here in Washington, D.C., those who've been formerly incarcerated, those who've dropped out. How do you take the secret sauce and the elements that Mary Lou just mentioned and apply that to such a heterogeneous population?
Well, in DC, we're at the very beginning of our collaborative work. Raise DC is what we're calling it. My co-chair, Deshawn Wright, Deputy Mayor for Education, is here this afternoon. And part of what I think has been useful is that as a community, we're able actually to leverage and elevate the heterogeneity of the population. And with that, then also it's a call for action for more people to be involved. So in the first piece, I think what we've embraced as a city, which is very helpful, is to look at prevention and recovery. So the idea is that we're also elevating the fact that as we want to create a streamline that gets young people from 0 to 24 with an education and career, we're not going to let go of the young people who are struggling today. We're not going to say, well, you know, too bad, find your way, but to really try to figure out what we do for the young people who are currently out of school. And they're out of school in different ways, and they're connected to different things, which is another reason why, while I feel that the work that we do through the See Forever Foundation across the continuum is very important, we do have to have other partners to make it successful, and that's what the collaborative brings to this population. Because just as some young people are struggling because they're out of school because they're pregnant, some young people are 22 and out of school and don't quite fit in the adult system, don't quite fit in the high school system. And you need to be able to leverage the multiple systems, the multiple players in trying to be able to serve this population. And also to have the people wrapped around them who provide the support services, although that's so soft of a word, because we do know, for example, in DC, that while we are trying to tackle family homelessness, We don't have a strategy for youth homelessness. So our youth kind of sleep on couch to couch or bed to bed, and the school system can't address that, but the health and human services agencies can and other nonprofits. So the complexity of the population and the heterogeneity of the population really calls for a collective impact in order to significantly address the needs for those young people who are currently out of school.
Beautifully said. We're glad you're here in the district, Lucretia. Youth gang violence is an intractable problem, and David, yet you've done extraordinary things through Operation Ceasefire and Boston Gun Project. Tell us about what were the elements of those efforts that made it successful, and then the more difficult news, why did it dissipate over time?
Not an intractable problem. Shall I continue?
Boy, you're a model for panelists. Okay, Nancy, we're...
So that's actually a good place to start, because I've been doing this stuff long enough now that the most important shift in our sort of social policy world, I think, is the move from thinking that all these sorts of things can't be fixed, which is where we used to be, to realizing that actually they can be, or if not fixed, then dramatically, importantly affected. And the particular things that you map onto any particular substantive problem are going to be different. But I think you've already heard the shape of what fundamentally has been learned about this, which is that you need two things. You need a very clear data-driven logic model, evidence-based strategy. You know, I think anything I'm involved in, everybody needs to be able to show up for work on Monday and know exactly what they're doing. And there has to be a reason to think that's going to work. If it's not working, it has to be faced and adjusted. But the days of this, what I think of as how I spent my summer vacation social programming, here's what I did, that's over, right? We don't do that anymore. And the second thing is that for most of these problems, you can't do it alone. And so you need the right parties with the right capacities to do the work that that logic model says needs to be done. And when, for many of the things, so the work I know the best is in public safety and community safety, but the really good news in that area is that over and over and over again, when you really unpack it, it's a whole lot easier than we think it is. And what we found in Boston was gang violence, which was being treated as intractable, was actually being driven by 0.5% of the young men across the city, and even most of them didn't like what was going on. And when you got the right folks in criminal justice and programs and communities to engage with that 0.5% in the right way, particularly as we ended up thinking by giving what we thought of as an honorable exit. If you don't like what's going on, if you don't know how to be safe, if nobody's making it safe for you to get out, the first thing we need to do is make people safe and give them the cover they need to step away from situations that they don't like, which is typically true of homelessness and over-incarceration and being abused by older men. And you know, most of these things, the people we see as the problems are at least half victims, and very often more than that. And it turned out that the right kind of engagement with that 0.5% was extraordinarily effective. And second question you asked was, why did it fall apart, which it did. And the answer was that those of us who were driving it did not pay the kind of attention that we ought to have to institutionalization and sustainability. And I think, again, I see this in all sorts of areas where it's turned out you said move the needle 10%. I don't get out of bed for 10%, I'm going to tell you.
You're a good man.
We can do way better than that on a lot of these things. But getting the right answer is one important demand. Making sure that that's built into the life of our cities and organizations and institutions is an equally important and separate problem, and start thinking about it from the beginning.
Wonderful, David. Thank you so much. Nancy, we hold up Strive Partnership as sort of the model for the country again and again and again. Tell us about the barriers you had to overcome to make Strive as successful as it's been. And then second, we have Scott Cowan, and wonderful efforts being led in a couple of communities on higher education. Tell us what you're doing at SUNY to have collective impact that help young people, and particularly disconnected youth.
Well, I think I wanted to say first that we did not know we were doing collective impact in Cincinnati. When we started, we didn't even have a firestorm. It just evolved, particularly through the university community, that we really needed more students coming to college ready for college. And we didn't really want to sit there and say, so if you would just send us smarter students, we would do a better job. We had this reality that the universities in our Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky community were actually the institution preparing the teachers who were teaching the kids who were coming to college, ready or not. I just want that to sink in, because there is, in the whole of education, a lot of finger pointing. And in 2003, when our conversations began to evolve, the K-12 system was really in the barrel, and most everybody else wasn't. And so how did we build enough trust and relationship to say, in an authentic way, we're from the university, the United Way, the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, and we're here to help? No, we're here to own. And so one of the concepts that always has meant a lot to me is this notion of shared vulnerability, because, my institution's graduation rates weren't so hot either. And I kind of had to say that in order to build some trust across the table to what might have been K-12 partners. And even though in our community, Success by Six was hugely successful, our statistics on kids coming to kindergarten ready to learn were still pretty abysmal. So we did use data, but we didn't arrive at that right off the bat. We just sort of struggled with, we've got some major leaks in the pipeline. And frankly, we thought, like a lot of the completion agenda, that we could solve this from sort of high school to college. And then we said, well, maybe we need to look at middle school, and well, then maybe elementary school. And then, because we had a really great children's hospital in Cincinnati, we got into prenatal work. So it is cradle to career, but it's really pre-cradle to post-career, I suppose. So let's see if I can get a couple of cliches out on the table. We were 1,000 points of light, but we were not working systemically together. As Jeff Edmondson, who's either nodding or sinking down in his chair because he really led Strive at that time and now leads the Strive National Network, we were program rich but system poor, and that kind of stuck with us. We were looking at two communities across the state line, so we used to talk about the Ohio River not being the Great Wall of China. We were bursting through jurisdictions to come to common cause. So I think it started with a vision that we could seal the leaks in the education pipeline from cradle to career every step of the way. I think it came from a respect for data. We got a lot of training from Six Sigma because we have a lot of manufacturers in that area, and we taught them some things about Six Sigma. They taught us some things about it. We learned to organize the early childhood community, so aptly led by the United Ways of America, to sit in a room and we would close the door and throw away the key till they came out with a focused set of interventions, and then convince the funding community that investing in an evidence-based solution might be better than, here's my last cliche, spray and pray. So all of that, over now almost 10 years, has led to gains from 10% to even 40% in some of the metrics and indicators we're tracking. So I grow where I'm planted and now find myself in New York State by choice, leading one of the most complex and distributed higher education systems in the country, and have, through a series of conversations, joined with the 64 campuses of the SUNY system, to make sealing the leaks in the education pipeline a mantra for our entire system. So now, learning from Strive and what Ben Hecht and Living Cities has helped promote or experiment with in other cities across the country, we're trying, community by community, to launch collective impact discussions, much the way Lucretia is now doing in DC. And I'm now climbing a hill I thought I'd never climb again in my own community of Albany to see if disparate parties can come together to really make a difference in sealing the leaks in the education pipeline. There's no quick way.
Wonderful. And Nancy, as she said earlier, it's the 150th anniversary of the Morrill Act that created public land-grant colleges and universities. Wouldn't it be great if we could use that occasion to propel higher education to help opportunity youth all over the country? Jim Shelton, a lot of people in this audience have, literally, there are waiting lists of young people in their programs who are desirous of getting help. You have some extraordinary reach and big levers in government. How do we effectively pull these big levers in government to scale community collaborations that are effectively connecting and re-engaging opportunity youth?
Sure. I mean, being at the federal government level, you're a long distance from people who are actually doing the work. So there are really three things that we really need to pay attention to. First is the conditions. The first is the conditions. Have we created the policy environment that actually makes it not only possible but easier to do this work? What we all know is that collaboration is actually difficult, and it's even more difficult if you're trying to fight rules and regulations in order to get there, which brings me to the second thing, incentives. We have programs that have resources tied to them, some competitive, some that flow by formula. Some of those things actually encourage you to collaborate. Many of them, especially in the past, have not done that. In fact, they've done the opposite, where people felt like they had to work in their individual silos, or they couldn't share data, or they couldn't share funding. And in not being able to do those things, we have actually defeated our own success. The third part of that, though, is that the capacity. Communities have been trying to figure out how to collaborate for a long time. And what we've seen is a change over the last several years where, one, folks have figured out how to focus on outcomes and what that looks like, and we can get behind that. People have figured out how to actually share information and data, and we can get behind that and make it easier to do. And people have figured out that they're solving problems that other people have solved before. And what we have not done as effectively as we could have been is highlighting those effective programs and practices and making them accessible to other folks that are doing that work. When we do those three things well, and then do things like today, and using the fact that we can convene as government to bring people together to demonstrate that not only is this possible, but in fact, if you do it, it's the way that it should be. I mean, one of the great things about this movement is that for anybody who's been in it for a while, you always had this fantasy, right? You had the fantasy that you could get together with the other folks that were trying to do the same work, and you could all agree and work together. Well, now we know it's possible, and our public resources can get behind that.
We're so lucky to have him in government. Please stay. That's truly. We have so much talent in the audience. We want to integrate some key respondents. So Patty's going to call on a number of them for comments now. Patty?
So the way we're going to do this, because we want to keep on time and have lots of time for open Q&A also, is to ask our key respondents to stick to one sentence, one response. Because these guys have had so much interesting to say, and we want to make sure. So Francisco Garcia is a college student at Rio Hondo College and creates murals throughout California and Arizona. Where is he? Good. Francisco, did you have some response to this panel based on your experience? Come on up to the mic.
Yes, can you repeat the question one more time?
Just what is your response to what you've heard based on your experience? What does your experience tell you about collaborative work?
Collaborative work. I believe that collaborative work is really important, especially working with the youth, mentoring the youth, and providing resources in the schools, like actually having mentors and youth liaisons working in the school system with the youth so that the youth know that these programs are available.
Good. Thank you very much. So Let's just keep moving through the folks that have something to add to this. Willa Selden, are you here, the partner from Bridge Span who helped us so much with our work? What is your one takeaway or something you want to add to this panel? Willa? So in case you didn't hear her, the critical nature of funding for the backbone organizations. And I can see our panelists nodding on that one. Jeff Edmondson, we already mentioned, is Managing Director of Strive. Folks, if it'd help if you get to the mics, or it might, Jeff, why don't you go ahead, I'll repeat. Okay. We know Jeff, he is the person who started this idea before he knew he had the idea.
I would just say that it really comes down to data and how we use it at the community level to set ambitious targets, like David said, that are more than 10%, and then keeping folks focused on that target rather than wandering the wilderness. And then also at the programmatic level, using data not just to prove things, which is what we too often do, but using data to improve things so that the data actually becomes a tool of getting better at how we support children rather than a tool to beat people up.
Good. I think that was something that Gene Sperling also reinforced with us, which is great, the important role of data and not using it to beat, but to encourage. John Kenya, who was one of our very first people that we reached out to as a council based on this fabulous article about collective impact. What would you add to what you heard?
Patty, what I'd love to do is amplify Jim's point and also one of the council recommendations around helping the federal government figure out how to simplify and align funding requirements, eligibility requirements, reporting requirements. This work is so challenging just to get different people working together across sectors at a community level. And of course, federal funding is really, really important. And the real creative players at this are able to stitch together funding sources in really unique ways, but particularly in rural areas and smaller cities where there aren't a lot of resources, the ability to actually access governmental resources in a flexible way is absolutely really critical. So I applaud the council for recommending that.
Good. Thank you, John. And thank you for helping us get to this point of recognizing this important lever point for more effectiveness. Maurice Miller is the founder and CEO of Family Independence Initiative. He's also a council member and has, in every time the council's spoken, hammered home that there is more than one kind of collaborative. So Maurice, what do you want to add to what we talked about here?
I think one of the most natural collaboratives is when families come together to solve their own problems. And so because programs can't reach everybody, all the success you see in America really has to do with families and peers and friends coming together. And it doesn't require a logic model, and it sustains. So those are the efforts that we want to really bring up. I think all hands on deck, which is what our really charge was, that it is involving the families and looking at those solutions and also resourcing and funding them.
And Maurice has some family leaders here that we'll be talking about a little bit later, so welcome to those heroes. Bridge, back to you.
Extraordinary to hear powerhouses from Francisco to Maurice boil down their wisdom that they've written and talked about for 30 and 40 years into one sentence. Patty, you're good. You are good. Now we're going to have some fun. We're going to open it up, this extraordinary panel, to your questions. So please rise. Make your questions brief. They will make their answers pointed and brief, and we'll get as many as we can in a lot of time. So questions? Yes, Adria.
So even as we address the heterogeneity that Lucretia spoke about and the multiplicity of issues that people spoke about really eloquently and the shared vulnerability, how do we not let public school officials and public school districts off the hook? Because we know we need the pathways and the funding to do that work. A lot of it is in that system. So the question is, how do we do all of this and yet keep that front and center?
Wonderful question. Lucretia or Nancy, you want to take it?
Yeah, go ahead. One of the things we're fortunate, I say, but unfortunate, others may say, is that we have a multiplicity of leaders of schools in District of Columbia, a mix of charter schools and DCPS. And we've been fortunate that our chancellor, Kaya Henderson, who is over DCPS, owns the idea of recovery and owns the idea that her system is responsible if students leave and also responsible for getting them back. And on the charter school side, a similar responsibility is felt and shared. And I think in one of the things that Deshaun Wright, our deputy mayor, has also done is to elevate the fact that it is actually a community problem when young people leave. And, you know, so in our system, I think we have leadership that makes the point that it's a community responsibility, but also if a student is leaving, one of the mantra points that we've started saying, we say in our organization, but also in other schools, is that we've essentially pushed them out, right? Because when you talk to little kids, the first thing they want to do is go to school. So if they want to leave school, it's something that we did. And so I think that's one of the responsibility points that we've taken on as a system in DC, which then, as we're building the Raise DC partnership, it means that we're all focusing on that as a key lever for change for us.
Nancy, you want to add?
Well, I just think there's some pretty big bureaucracies coming together, and I've often said, if I hear it's all about the children one more time, because it is, and it's all about the adults and their working conditions and what we consider the classroom and the way we organize schools, which is kind of frankly owned by our community. We often say the school is run by the bus, the bell, and the banana. And, you know, there are structures that have been in place for a long time that simply need to change. And our work has been more successful when you can kind of get that bureaucracy, my own included, at a common table and talk practically about what will help people do their jobs better. I just don't think putting the bullseye on K-12 has really effectively moved the dial. And so it's a broader ownership that I see evolving, that teachers' unions have to come to the table, and rotating superintendents have to come to the table, and PTAs have to come to the table, and health and social service agencies, because we all have a stake in it. And that, I think, will move the dial better, faster.
Jim?
Just really quickly, you know, Nancy talked about how everyone talks about all children all the time. And what we don't always talk about is the fact that in order to get to all children, you have to get to each child. And so the latest competition that we put out, the Race to the Top District, is built around that notion, that you have to figure out how to reach each child, some of which will be struggling, some which may be disconnected, and figure out how you build in a system that will actually personalize and accommodate each one of them. You'll aggregate up in order to get the benefits of scale, but if you start with that very basic notion and build the system to do so, we can do that. And I'll stop.
Well done. Other questions? Yes, in the back.
One question that is like really crazy is the fact of young people who are actually incarcerated now and who is about to come home now. What type of successful collaborations or anything that the community can do that can help them regenerate back into the community?
Don't lock them up.
Next question, no. Lucretia or David, you want to elaborate?
So, I think a lot of the time that in order to be as stupid as we are about this, you have to be fantastically sophisticated. There is no way on earth that any set of interventions can deal with a country that we have, this is the point we have reached, in which we are releasing 700,000 people from prison every year. And they come back to often very concentrated communities, and then people who run reentry programs on shoestrings are expected to deal with this. This is an outrage, it's a tragedy, it's un-American, and there is no way to deal with it on the back end. But the only way we're going to be able to deal with this is to deal with our public safety problems in ways that don't involve locking so many people up in the first place, which is demonstrably possible and has to be the lead of the wedge. And I will simply note that my state governor, Governor Cuomo, led the news today by proposing changes in New York state law that would eliminate the statutory possibility for so many, especially young men of color in New York City, getting locked up for very, very, very small amounts of marijuana, becoming part of the damaged population that all the rest of us try to deal with for the rest of their lives. Good idea today, bad idea the rest of the time. You really need to change the way we're dealing with the pipeline here.
I'll just echo that. Not locking children up for children behavior is the first big step. But I think one of the, our co-founder, David Domenici, has started an initiative nationally. I think one thing that we do need to look at is the quality of education while young people are incarcerated. Part of what happens is if they've already been out of school and then they're essentially captive, and you fail to take the opportunity to give them an education, to catch them up, to build up their skills, and help them then create what they need to take back into the community, that's our first failure. So building up the quality of education, the quality of their lives, improving their outcomes, decision-making, development, would be a critical first step. Creating for them the portfolio that they need to take to say they've got these credits, they've got this, they know this math, they know this English would be the first, a big step. One thing that we're working on in the district, and I can't say it's the solution, is to then start earlier with the young people while they're incarcerated on their transition planning with respect to education. What school are you going to go to? Who's the principal you speak to? Which classes will you be enrolled in? And that becomes a system strategy. So you're not leaving a young person and his or her parent to decipher what goes on throughout the education system, but that's something that the systems, the juvenile system, the education system, the social services that are still wrapped around the family, work together with the family and the young person to create that plan when they transition in. And then working on the difference between district policy and district preference when young people come back, and making clear incentives for enrolling, supporting, putting resources behind young people who come in. And we have to acknowledge, one of the fights we always fight is the idea that why would you spend so much money on this kind of program for these kind of kids? They already demonstrated they didn't want to go to school, or they were locked up. They're not really our best effort. And if you beat kids down, it's going to take a much higher dosage to build them up. So when they get into schools, another strategy that we're working on, the district is working on it, we're working on it in our school, is then building, to Jim's point, very individualized service and education plans for young people once they get back in school, to help with the challenges of reentry, to help build their educational plans, but to also make sure their family and community supports are well in line so they have the supports they need to really turn around their opportunities.
Thank you, David and Lucretia. One of the most inspirational leaders in America, Bill Strickland. Bill.
My thought would be to have you address in some way sustainability. You touched on it when you said failure kids do well. Young people deserve the opportunity to have bright, innovative ideas be maintained over a long enough period of time to make a difference. You get a lot of these ideas that become flavor of the month, and these kids deserve an institutional solution. And we, I think, have an obligation to figure out how to sustain these efforts, not just create them.
I think one of the things we're learning is that the more public we go as communities about the challenges and what we're doing to solve the problem, the more impossible it is to disconnect. So I think the impact, the social impact that the myriad of organizations can achieve has to be very, very public. The media becomes your friend because it's a lot harder to say, what are we going to do now? Back away? Say, never mind? So that's a form of sustainability. And the second, I think, is the way in which we invest dollars locally. That's changing dramatically when people see that they can actually, philanthropists and corporate foundations and the federal government, that they can invest in results. That's a way to keep people at the table and to sustain the initiative.
Just really quickly, the ability to create an infrastructure that supports this kind of work, both the data infrastructure, the policy infrastructure that allows you to pay people based on their outcomes, to reallocate resources from things that aren't working towards things that are working, the ability to braid funding streams, those kinds of things that you can lock into the way people do their work and the incentives that they have to do their work that way are the things that are going to lead to long-term sustainability. It may change shapes, but if we can get those things in place, then we can actually have a much higher probability of getting things done for the long term.
We're running out of time, so I'm going to give Mary Lou and Lucretia and David also the last word around sustainability or anything else you want to share very quickly. Mary Lou, any final thoughts?
I kind of echo what Nancy said. the greater the public awareness, the greater the community engagement, the less likely you are to not continue to drive towards mission and long-term sustainability. And we had a conversation earlier about how government's involved in that. Our mayor in Wisconsin has been, or in Milwaukee, has been part of this since the beginning, but I would tell you any mayor in Milwaukee would want to be, because it's been successful, because we have all the right players in place, and because it's important that there would be a community force to reckon with if we didn't continue this engagement.
Anyone else with a final word? David,
I think
quickly.
we're all saying the same thing, which is really very interesting. So the biggest single change that collective impact we've seen in our work in the last couple of years is very organized communities going to their elected and appointed leaders and saying, we want this particular approach that drives crime down and keeps people out of prison and has these other good benefits. And they're getting the responses usually that they're used to getting, which is people sort of patting them on the shoulder and saying, that's very nice, we'll get back to you. And their response has been, we don't think you heard what we said. And they're getting responses. So it's a big shift.
Thank you, David. Lucretia, final word?
Yeah, so I guess for my final word, I do want to echo what, I can't remember who was it who said all in for youth. I think that should go on our t-shirts, to Sean, when we start. I think that's a great, great segment. And I would like to thank John Bridgen also for bringing us all together and moving this forward so eloquently.
Very, very nice. Thank this extraordinary panel, but stay with us one more minute. Do you still want me to go through quickly the announcements? So Patty wants the White House Council for Community Solutions to continue, but it will not. So the encouraging news is that there are wonderful efforts being launched, and I've been asked to quickly highlight them if you'll bear with me. First, in the final report of the council, we make a number of recommendations that are relevant to what you heard today, including providing public and private funding to follow best practice cross-sector community collaborations, and many other things that you can read about that John Kanye also highlighted. Second, it's a very exciting effort. Building on the work of the White House Council, the Aspen Institute intends to launch the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions and the Opportunity Youth Incentive Fund. The Aspen Forum for Community Solutions will spotlight communities that are successfully pulling together to move the needle on a community challenge, not just 10%, but much, much beyond that, and to educate national and local leaders about this strategy as a possible solution. The Aspen Forum will be launched with the generous support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and others who've been at this work literally for years and years and years. I'd like to ask Elliot Gerson of the Aspen Institute to stand and be acknowledged for this wonderful continuing work. Elliot? And Walter Isaacson and the wonderful team there. Third, Opportunity Nation. Mark your calendars. On September 19th of this year at George Washington University, a coalition of more than 250 organizations representing nonprofits, businesses, community and faith-based groups, and leaders from local, state, and federal government will assemble to do many things to move the economic and social mobility agenda. But among them will be new data at the state and local levels on Opportunity Youth, a roadmap for action to reconnect as many Opportunity Youth as possible, working in partnership with Youth Build, Jobs for the Future, and the Forum for Youth Investment. And to use the Council's Employer Toolkit, thank you, Bobby Silton, to continue to connect businesses and Opportunity Youth and to accelerate multiple pathways to success, including through career and technical education. Opportunity is led by the extraordinary Mark Edwards. I'd like you to rise, Mark, who is with us today. Mark Edwards. Fourth, what an outpouring. In March, the Cowan Institute for Public Education Initiatives at Tulane University launched its initiative, Reconnecting Opportunity Youth. With funding support from AT&T, this initiative is examining the challenges that Opportunity Youth face, assessing services that are currently available to them in Greater New Orleans, and analyzing strategies that enable struggling youth to reach their potential and contribute to their community. The Institute is developing a specific community action plan to address the issue of disconnected youth in New Orleans, with the goal of creating an infrastructure of effective, sustainable, and meaningful services and programs that will prepare these young people for college and career. Based on the outreach and research, the Cowan Institute will initiate a citywide, multi-sector collaborative to accomplish systemic change and significantly increase the number of young New Orleans, did I say that right, who embark on pathways that lead to careers and engaged lives. Hats off to our White House Council member, Scott Cowan, for this extraordinary work. Scott. And finally, the Torchlight Prize is another new initiative that recognizes that some successful collaborations are initiated by the community itself rather than structured organizations, as Maurice Miller has so well educated us. This national award, launched by the Family Independence Initiative, honors informally organized groups of low-income people who have successfully created initiatives that engage disconnected youth and strengthen their communities. The winners of the 2012 Torchlight Prize, and please hold your applause until all of them are acknowledged, are, this sounds like the Academy Awards, Black Dot, established by young African-American artists and cultural workers in Oakland and New Orleans who created cultural venues, after-school programs, community gardens, and small businesses. They established themselves as a caring adult presence in their communities, instilling cultural pride and strengthening the community. Second, Club Social Infantile, several Colombian families in East Boston came together to create structured activities for their youth in the tradition of Latin American natieres, or social clubs. Meeting monthly, they organize events that have strengthened family and community bonds. Next, Iumien families in Richmond and Oakland, California came together to solve a gang violence problem. They worked together to rebuild a cohesive community and with small personal donations created a community center, temple, scholarship fund to address the cultural disconnect and lack of viable alternatives that were at the root of the problem. Many youth are now college-bound. Representatives from these winners of the Torchlight Prize, please stand and be enthusiastically applauded. Extraordinary stories. So that concludes our panel. We want to thank again these extraordinary Americans who came together and shared with us their wisdom and hopefully can be guiding lights to all of your efforts as we go out and try to scale these efforts around the country, including with our federal government. Thank you, Jim.